Hello and welcome. It is Big Talk with Todd and Noah, presented by Xfinity. Back from another week in Madison. Second time in Madison in a couple of weeks. You guys did get to go back to Mickey's. I will say I went back to Cafe Zupa's, so it was a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. I cannot go to Madison without going to Mickey's. Now, I did not go with the liver and onions this time, much to the disappointment of the whole staff there. They kind of expected it. But I had to go back to the Scrambler, my old standby, and it delivered. Now, I actually added 2 fried eggs on top, so
Wow.
that made it a 5-egg extravaganza.
Oh, you are protein to the max this week, is what you're saying. You're so jacked right now. It's unreal.
I know. I barely fit in the screen. I know.
Yeah, I actually think they're mostly disappointed that you didn't order the liver and onions, because I'm pretty sure that you're the only person who orders. You and LD are
Me
the
and
only
LD
people
and
that order.
KT's mom, if she was ever with us.
Right. That's a good point. Good point. In terms of the game that we got, that was actually pretty fun
Yeah.
and ended up being very competitive between Wisconsin and Oregon. Wasn't sure exactly how it was all going to go down, but you did say going into it that you expected Wisconsin to play a lot better. They certainly did defensively to
Yeah.
keep it close into the fourth quarter, and then Oregon eventually found a way.
Yeah. And I don't think, unlike the Penn State game that we were at a few weeks ago, I don't think their defense ran out of gas in the fourth quarter. They played all the way to the very end. Just Oregon is a championship level team and found a way to win in the fourth quarter. And, you can say, well, Oregon must have slipped a little bit. No, Wisconsin is a good defensive football team. They got embarrassed against Iowa. They came out and played with a huge chip on their shoulder, and they played really well, and they made everything difficult. They didn't give up explosive plays, so they really made it difficult on Dillon Gabriel and Oregon. And, it was an old school kind of game, right? Oregon ran the football. Jordan James was physical, running the football. They had short pass completions. They didn't have the big, wide open, explosive plays. But the other thing is Oregon's defense showed up as well, and, continually has played at a high level. And without Jordan Birch again, who's arguably their best defensive player, they played without him. They still held, Wisconsin to a very low amount of yardage and points, made things difficult on Braden Locke. And so, it was a gut check kind of win. And, for the third time this season, Oregon overcame a deficit in the fourth quarter to find a way to win. Did it against Boise, did it against Ohio State, and did it the other night against Wisconsin.
For the third time as well in the season, Wisconsin has now blown a lead against the top 25 opponent. Did it at USC when they were ranked 13th, against Penn State in the game we did going into the fourth quarter, or well, at least going into the second half. They were close going into the fourth quarter as well. And this one going into the fourth quarter up 13-6. Now, that play to start the fourth quarter, the fourth down decision by Dan Lanning to keep the offense on the field. And this is, we talk about and I know you talk about this a lot, but the age of quarterbacks and the veteran status of certain ones. And this one played out exactly that way. You have Dillon Gabriel on a huge fourth down play to start the fourth quarter, extends a play and fits it into a window that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah, that was the play of the game. I mean, it really was. And it was just so ironic and iconic, I guess, that it came right on the heels of jump around, right? I mean, jump around started, and that place was going crazy because the home team had Oregon on a 4th and 9 situation. And, we're 100% sure they were going to go for it or what they were going to do at that point. And then Dillon Gabriel just came out and calmly extended the play because it wasn't there initially, rolled out, extended the play, moving to his left and delivered a dime to Terrence Ferguson for the first down. And, I mean, that was literally the play of the game because it just kind of changed the momentum of the football game. And I think, Dan Lanning said something to us interesting during the week, and he was talking about why he went for the fake punt with Jordan Birch the week before against Maryland in the third quarter. He said, momentum is a real thing in football, and it really is. And at that moment, just like when we were at the Penn State game, right, the pick six changed the momentum of the game. That fourth down conversion by Oregon to start the fourth quarter changed the momentum of the football game there too.
Just 2 other quick things before we move on. First, just tell us a little bit more about your take towards the end of the game. I thought you were spot on. national championship teams, like we've seen some that have just been completely dominant over the course of the year, or maybe it was early that you stumble and then they just catch steam towards the end. It does feel like every national championship team at some point, though, does have to have one of these types of wins.
Yeah, and it's not like they were terrible,
Right.
I mean, they ran into a tough opponent on the road, and they had to gut it out and find a way to win, and so again, I think if you look historically, very seldom do you see a team march straight through the season right into the national championship and never have to win a game like this, where maybe your offense isn't playing its best, or something else happens and you have to find a way to win. But it wasn't like they were sloppy and turned the ball over 4 or 5 times or did anything like that and then got lucky at the end. I mean, they just were in a dogfight and they found a way to get it done. And I think that's the mark of a championship character or championship pedigree kind of football team.
So they have the week off before they host Washington. Just real quick on Wisconsin, they go to Nebraska this weekend in a huge game for both teams to try to be bowl eligible. Phil Longo gets let go after the game. We were both big fans of what Phil brings to the table. Excellent football coach, great human being, and we know that he'll land on his feet somewhere at some point. But for both those teams, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth later in the show, but both Nebraska and Wisconsin making changes to their offensive coordinators in the last 2 weeks here. And for Wisconsin, I was a little curious, I guess, by the Longo decision. It just feels like personnel right now and depth is where they're lacking, not necessarily in the play calling.
Yeah, everybody wondered when Phil came there last year, and he talked about bringing the air raid to Wisconsin. Was that going to fit? Was it going to work? Was it going to work with the weather? Was it going to work with the kind of offensive linemen that they typically get? Was it going to work with the fan base that's used to whatever? Well, I don't know that we really even know for sure because he was kind of playing without a full deck in the 2 years that he was there. Both years, the guy that was their starting quarterback got hurt and last year, Tanner Mordecai was out for a significant portion. This year, Tyler Van Dyke, wasn't even, available the rest of the year after he got hurt in the Alabama game. And that's nothing against Braden Locke, but Braden Locke is not the guy that they wanted running the offense. And now he is, and I think they're somewhat limited with him, and I think they're limited on the perimeter, in terms of dynamic playmakers that they don't have that maybe would make this offense better. I thought they ran the ball well the other night once they kind of figured out the inside zone wasn't working and went to some different options. But at the end of the day, they had 226 yards of total offense. And, is that play calling? Is it coaching? Is it personnel? I guess it's a little bit of everything. But, being the son of a coach, I hate when a coach gets fired, especially when he's a friend of mine. And Phil Longo is a friend of mine. And pretty soon, some of these coaching staffs are not going to want us calling games because we did Florida State, Notre Dame, and the day after that, 3 coaches get fired from Florida State. And, it really stinks. That's a horrible part of the business. And unfortunately, I think sometimes assistant coaches get made scapegoats, and a head coach kind of has to do something to save face or save his own rear end in some cases. It stinks. The whole part of it stinks. But
I'm with you 100%. I think that's all very well said, and we'll see how Wisconsin moves forward from here under Luke Fickell. Let's just go through a lot of the rest of the games. I'll just kind of quickly mention, give me some thoughts. Washington on Friday gets to bowl eligibility. That's a really remarkable turnaround, just given how much they lost with the exit of Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think Jed Fish and his staff have done a really good job. I mean, to get them to this point where they're bowl eligible, and that was a team that was hot that they beat, right? UCLA had won 3 games in a row. Ethan Garbers had been playing really well. They were kind of on a streak. And now the only question about Washington as they get ready for their rivalry game is, who's going to be their quarterback? Will Rogers had been the guy who transferred in from Mississippi State, got benched in the 3rd quarter. And Desmond Williams, who they're very high on, and they've used him all season as kind of a change of pace guy. He's an electrifying runner, but he also can throw, came in and played well. 7 of 8, 67 yards and a touchdown. So We'll see how that whole thing shakes out. But, Jonah Coleman, who I think is a really good football player, 95 yards and a couple touchdowns. So, credit to Jed Fish and his coaching staff and that team for showing some resiliency and toughness and getting to bowl eligibility.
UCLA still has a chance to do the same. They're 4-6 after that 3-game winning streak put them in position. Ohio State, number 2 in the country. Wrigley Field matchup beats Northwestern 31-7.
Yeah, it may have been a little bit of a sluggish start. It was at one of those 11 a.m. Central Time kickoffs,
Brutal.
But Ohio State did what they had to do. I mean, they're clearly the better team. It was an overmatched situation. Same way with Penn State beating Purdue. Same kind of situation. Penn State clearly the best team on the field, and I think for Penn State, 2 weeks in a row against Washington, the whiteout game, and then in this game, really playing some of their best football, most complete football of the season. And, there's 2 unicorns in college football right now. Obviously one of them is Travis Hunter at Colorado, and the other one is Tyler Warren at Penn State. Another big game with 8 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown and 63 yards and a touchdown on the ground as well. So a good win for both Penn State and Ohio State.
Nice win for Illinois as well. Gets to 7-3 on the season, 38-16 over Michigan State. Look, we saw Michigan State maybe play their best game of the season against Iowa earlier, about a month ago now. They have not necessarily found ways to win. I think we both believe that they've got the makings now in the next couple years of what's going to be a really impressive program. And Jonathan Smith is a great coach. But just a huge credit to Brett Bielema, his staff, and his players, the way that they put this season together.
Yeah, I mean, and, they had a 2-game losing streak, so things could have gotten out of hand or gone south quickly. But Brett Bielema is a really good football coach and has good control of that team, and that was a really good win for them. And so, to be sitting there at 7-3, and you look at some of the teams they've lost to, Penn State was the first team they lost to. We did that game. I mean, they're a good football team. Yeah, they're a very solid football team in the middle of or at the end now of a very solid year.
USC gets back in the win column. Finally a 1-score win for USC. It had been 5 1-score losses on the season. They finally get a 1-score victory over Nebraska. This was a huge game for both teams. 28-20 the final score. And Jaden Maeva starts the game as opposed to Miller Moss, gets his first win. There was some good, there was some bad. 3 touchdowns, a pick 6, lost a fumble, rushed for a touchdown. But when it's all said and done, he got the victory in his first start.
Yeah, and it's good for him, and probably a lot of excitement for the football program. I'll tell you 2 other things about USC that worth mentioning. First of all, running back Woody Marks is maybe one of the best players in the Big Ten that people don't know about or doesn't get talked about as much. He's really a good football player, a dynamic runner, 146 yards in this game. And the defense, with new defensive coordinator Danton Lynn, they've had their moments where it looked like they were ready to turn the corner, then it looked the other way. But the one area that they've been really good at all year is their pass defense, particularly on third down. Their third down defense, and opponents are only converting, I think it's under 10% in third down and long situations. They've been outstanding in those kind of situations, making it difficult on they made it difficult on Dylan Raiola in this game. Nebraska 310 yards of offense and kind of struggled to make the big plays. But a good win. Both teams needed it, and USC got it at home.
Rutgers also needed a victory to get to bowl eligibility. They did exactly that over Maryland, 31-17. The Greek Rifle, Ethan Kaliakmanis, 238 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kyle Monungai, the pride of Roseland, New Jersey, 97 yards and 2 scores on the ground. Maryland now at 4-6 themselves. And it's so interesting to see how the Big Ten standings are shaking out. Feels like outside of the top 4 teams, everybody is fighting anywhere between 7-3 and 4-6 right now.
Yeah. And, the thing about Rutgers, and you got to really tip your hat to Greg Schiano for, again, holding that team together. They were in a 4-game losing streak, and he didn't and they had tons of injuries, and he kept things together. He kept the morale high, and now they found themselves to get to 6-4. So a real credit to him and his staff. And Kyle Monungai, they're a different team when he's healthy and when he's and that showed up in this game against Maryland, because Maryland actually almost 500 yards of offense, 457 yards of total offense. Billy Edwards throwing the ball all over the place. And we talked about Woody Marks being one of those great players in the league that maybe people don't get to see. It's a shame that Ty Felton plays on a team that's 4-6 too, because, he is really one of the premier wide receivers, not just in the Big Ten, but in all of college football.
6 catches, 61 yards in this game. Now has the school record for most receptions in the season, passing DJ Moore, an excellent name. 86 catches for Felton this year. Let's go to some games this week, and we'll start with our game. By the way, that's big for Team Taylor Ham. Shout out Kyle Monunga. Let's preview the top 5 showdown that we've been waiting the last couple weeks for. Yeah. Indiana had the bye week to prepare for their biggest game of the year. Undefeated coming in, one of just 3 undefeated teams left, with BYU losing last week. You've got Oregon and Indiana, 2 of them in the Big Ten, and the third one is Army, who's going to play Notre Dame this week at Yankee Stadium, which we'll be there for. But Indiana, number 5 in last week's college football playoff ranking, expect that to be the same this week. It'll come out tonight. We're recording this on a Tuesday morning. But going to number 2, Ohio State. This is big noon on Fox. The week to prepare, all of the noise, the new extension for Curt Cignetti, all of what's gone into what is a culmination of the great story of college football. And yet here's Ohio State with a must win, because if they lose this game, they completely probably take themselves out of the college football playoff conversation. They might still be in there, but it's all out of their control. So a huge game for both teams.
Yeah, it really is. Now, again, there's a lot of talk with these SEC teams too, that the 2-loss team, maybe even a 3-loss team, is still in the playoff conversation. I think Ohio State is still going to be in that conversation, but they want to take care of business. And that's why, I think they're playing well right now. They're a double-digit favorite in this game. As good as Indiana's season has been, this will be by far the hardest game Indiana has played. I mean, look, Curt Cignetti and nobody on that roster had anything to do with their schedule and who they played, and the fact that they haven't played ranked opponents, but they've just whipped everybody except Michigan was the closest game that they played. But this will be a tall challenge because Ohio State is the most talented team that they will have faced. And the game's going to come down to, the things that games like this come down to. Who runs the football better? Who can run the ball and defend the run? Who wins the turnover battle? And who can create the most explosive plays on offense? And so these are 2 teams that are statistically are right next to each other on both offense and defense in terms of efficiency and productivity. And the thing about Indiana, and this is what people look, there's going to be millions of people to watch this game. And I hope Indiana plays well. I mean, I don't care who wins. I just hope it's a good game, because what people need to see about Indiana is they are as fine of a coached football team as anyone in college football in terms of their execution level on offense and in defense, their scheme, their game plan. They are really, really well coached, and they're fun to watch.
Yeah. The one thing I will ask you is, as we look towards the college football playoff conversation, I think a lot of people, you mentioned, and you're right, that the SEC discourse right now is fascinating, where you've got 2 or 3 loss teams that people are still considering to be viable options versus ACC teams that are rolling through and potentially aren't going to make it all together. Indiana's this interesting case study where I think everybody has looked at them and said, okay, look, you have to rank them where they are right now. They're undefeated. They've handled their business, and they, to your point, have dominated their competition. But I think a lot of people are saying, well, the schedule is so weak compared to everybody else that if they don't at least put together, like if they go in there and it's a 1-score loss, I think everybody's going to say, okay, they deserve to be in. But if they go in there and they lose by 28, I think the conversation becomes a little different.
I agree completely. And even if they find, still win in the Oaken Bucket game against Purdue and finish with that 1 loss, I think how you lose, particularly at this point in the year, is meaningful. I think it's big, because look, the people on the committee, they've got all kind of analytics at their disposal, and they can compare and contrast and do this, but they're still humans, right? So the eye test is still important. So look, Ohio State has a loss. That loss, the 1-point loss to Oregon in Game 6, has not hurt them, right?
Right.
They're sitting here at number 2. If Indiana goes into Columbus and plays well and doesn't get blown out, I think they're still going to have a really good chance to make it in the college football playoff.
Yeah, completely agree. We've got 2 games on NBC and Peacock for Big Ten action. One at Peacock noon. Illinois at Rutgers. Illinois coming off another solid win to snap the 2-game losing streak. Rutgers now back-to-back victories to get to bowl eligibility. It feels like this will be a nice defensive Big Ten matchup, but what say you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be a real physical football game, and 2 teams that there's not a whole lot that separates these 2. I think their record is different by 1 game, but I think the teams are very similar. And I think maybe Illinois throws it a little bit better, and I think Rutgers maybe runs it a little bit better. And they both play physical, hard-nosed defense. So I think that'll be a fun game. A real, I would guess, a rather low-scoring November type of football game.
We'll see if Catherine Tappan can attend that game and then still make it for our game at Yankee Stadium. After our game at Yankee Stadium, 10:15 p.m., NBC and Peacock, we've got this battle between USC and UCLA. USC coming off a victory. They can get to bowl eligibility. UCLA has to win this game to stay alive for that 6th win at the end of the season. You've got Danton Lynn now going against his former team. DC at USC was the DC at UCLA last year, but we know that these are always contentious. You throw the records out the window and you just let it rip.
Yeah, it's such a cool rivalry game, and it's crazy. It's always been a great rivalry game. Last year was the last year, and the Pac-12 was a rival. Now it's a Big Ten rivalry game.
Yeah.
The fact that it's so late. Here's what I'd say about this too. This will be the prettiest game on TV. And what I mean by that, now it may be too dark at that time to still see the San Gabriel Mountains. Maybe you get a glimpse of it, right at the beginning of the game. But it'll still be pretty because both teams will be wearing their dark uniforms. And I just think they're 2 of the best looking uniforms in all of college football. And so to have them on the field together in that setting of the Rose Bowl, it will look beautiful on Saturday night.
If you are a fan of classic unis, you will absolutely be a fan of this one. Let's go to our pick 1 for week 13. So pick 1 outcome for each of these 3 Big Ten matchups this coming week. Let's start with your alma mater, Penn State, going to Minnesota. Will Tyler Warren have a rushing, receiving, or passing touchdown in this game?
First of all, that's going to be a heck of a football game.
Yes,
that's going to be a big game for Penn State. I mean, they've been playing very well here, bouncing back after the loss to Ohio State. This will be a tough challenge. Minnesota will be rested, and they will play tough in this ball game. In terms of the answer to that question, I don't think he'll throw one this week. I think it's about 50-50 he catches or runs one. If I have to pick one, I'm going to say he runs for 1 in this game.
I like that answer. I think physical football game, you get near the goal line, you just give it to them and let them run it in. Northwestern at Michigan. Michigan currently at 5-5. They're just looking to just get to a bowl eligible season this year, which is insane considering what we all thought they were going to look like coming into the season. So will they or won't they become bowl eligible with this game?
I think they definitely will. I think they'll win big this week, actually. They've struggled offensively mightily all season long, but I think they'll have their best overall performance and most convincing win of the year against the Northwestern team that has even struggled more offensively, I think, than Michigan has. So I think at home, coming off the bye week, I think Michigan wins big.
Yeah, that defense is still legit, especially with all the pieces, and we'll see if Will Johnson returns with the week off. Nebraska at Wisconsin. Which offense will prove more effective in this game? First game for Wisconsin without Phil Longo. Second game for Nebraska with new offensive coordinator Dana Holgorsen.
Yeah. This game's at Nebraska, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, at Nebraska. That's correct.
It's at Nebraska. Yeah. And I think that's going to be the difference. I think Nebraska will win the game. I think that Dylan Raiola is back now for the second week. It'll be the second week with Dana Holgorsen fully in charge of the offense. Wisconsin is still challenged to throw the football. And I think Nebraska's defense will make it difficult for Wisconsin's offense, no matter who's calling plays or how they're handling the offensive situation. I think the home team wins in this case and finally gets to that bowl eligibility.
Yeah, they just are finally getting your prediction correct.
Yeah, 2 years later. Yeah.
Let's move to Xfinity.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I respect that wholeheartedly. Let's move to Xfinity Big Connections, and that is USC and UCLA's rivalry. Maybe a different conference, as you mentioned, Todd, but it really same hatred, same vitriol. All of that still applies. The series known as the Crosstown Cup. There are hate weeks for each school. That's where we're at. Hate weeks. At UCLA, the week before the game is known as Beat SC Week, officially dubbed Blue and Gold Week. At USC, the week before the game is Troy Week, or more popularly, Conquest. And USC wraps a Trojan shrine. It's also known as Tommy Trojan. Bubble wrap and duct tape. UCLA covers its Bruin Bear statue with tarp stating the Bruin Bear is hibernating. Beat SC. First game between these two took place in 1929. USC won 76-0. I don't think we're going to see that this week.
No.
But SC does lead the all-time series 50-34 and 7 ties between the two. First game between them, as mentioned many, many years ago. The offense always seems to shine in this series. Each team has scored at least 20 points since 2017. But UCLA has actually won a couple here, including last year, 2 of the last 3. Trophy is known as the Victory Bell, which is an awesome view. Oh, there it is. Victory Bell. Ring the bell. And you see it's got that Bruin blue after the victory last year. Always nice to feel like you can take home one of your own.
Do they repaint it, or do they have 2 separate ones with the school colors?
I honestly don't know, but I would imagine they've got to have 2 separate, right? To have to repaint every year, that feels wrong.
Yeah, that's pretty extensive paint job right there. But that's a cool trophy. And I already mentioned the uniforms, which are awesome in this game. And you just think about historically some of the great players, particularly offensive players that have stood out over the years for both squads. Really phenomenal history, rich history, as Bill Walton used to famously call it, the Conference of Champions, and it really showed up in some epic matchups between USC and UCLA on the gridiron.
Throw it down, young fella. Yes, every time he had one of the, I just remember Bill Walton doing a UCLA basketball game when Lonzo Ball was there, and every time they got the ball, he would just scream out, "Give it to Lonzo!" out of nowhere. And sometimes when they didn't have the ball, you would just hear him go, "Give it to Lonzo." I'm like, oh, the other team too. Nice. What a legend. Rest in peace to one of the greats. Let's go to Xfinity third chair. Fan submitted questions presented by Xfinity. Let's start with this one. It is a good question. I think a lot of people probably had the same, but it feels like a pretty straightforward answer. Is Oregon still the clear number 1 team after last weekend?
Well, I don't know what you mean by clear. I mean, I think, they're still number 1. Again, I don't think anything gets tarnished from them or about them in the way they won in Madison. And again, you get to this point of the year and you're still undefeated and you are winning games where you have to gut it out on the road. Yeah, they're still number 1. But as we've said all along, there are no clearly dominant teams in college football. All right. Everybody has shown that they can be beatable. But they are the number 1 team.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think there's as long as they continue to win, you don't get knocked off your pedestal just because you won in an ugly fashion. You still won. You still improved your record, 11-0 on the season. Second one this week. How crazy is it that Indiana is part of a top 5 matchup in 2024? I actually said this earlier today. I was talking to somebody else. If I had told you before the season that by the second to last week of the year, we would have 3 undefeated teams remaining, and I said, okay, the 3 undefeated teams are Oregon. Everyone would go, okay, yeah, totally makes sense. Then I'd say Indiana, and they'd say, what? And then I'd say Army, and they go, all right, now you're just messing with me. That's our 3 final undefeated teams. So how crazy is it that Indiana's in the top 5 matchup here in 2024?
It's amazing. It really is. I was on the radio show with Dan Dakich yesterday, and he's a former Indiana guy, And he says, it's amazing. I mean, the fact that Indiana is playing a football game as a top 5 opponent or a top 5 team in November, it's just got the whole area of Bloomington, the whole state of Indiana, just in a complete uproar. He says, man, we're going to the game. We bought tickets to the game. My wife and I, we got T-shirts. There's a bus of people going. So again, I just hope they show up and play well. And I think they will. I'm such a believer in Cignetti and just how he's handled everything so far. I mean, he has not looked phased by anything. He has not missed a beat. And so I think his team will kind of take that same approach and that same way of doing things. They're just going to go in and play a really, really talented football team.
Yeah. The one thing I will say before we get out of here about Curt Cignetti is every step along the way, he is the poster child right now for speaking things into existence. He's saying things with such confidence. It was, I'm trying to remember which game. I think it was the Nebraska game. And if you remember that one going in, a lot of people had questions. Okay, here's your first real test. Nebraska at that point, I think, only had the one loss on the season.
Right.
And they had played some excellent football. And they were an excellent defense. And you go into that game, and there were questions. How are you going to handle this? This is the first time you really have all these eyes on you and everything, attention. And he just looked, I think it was Jenny Taft in the eyes, and he just said, we're going to play well. And that was it. And I think that confidence and that continuous belief in himself and his team, that the guys respond. That's what stood out to me about this season.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the guys that he brought with him from JMU were used to it. And I think that they were able to kind of, I'm sure there were a lot of conversations in the locker room, with the players who were there that weren't with him at James Madison and saying, is this guy for real? And those guys from JMU said, oh yeah, this is who he is, man. He's like this every day. He believes, we believe. Why can't we win here? Why can't we do what we've been doing for the last couple of years at James Madison? Why can't we do that here at Indiana in the Big Ten? And sure enough, they're doing it, and they, like several teams, they went and got a veteran quarterback, Curtis Rourke. I think the other thing Curt Cignetti has done, and maybe a lot of people will try to take a page out of this book, is his whole philosophy on building a roster and recruiting and how he uses a transfer portal. He wants productivity and production over potential, right? He wants guys that have proven themselves, over a course of several years and many game reps, and say, those are the guys I want to try to build my team with. And it's worked.
No question about it. Indiana picked 17th in the Big Ten preseason poll out of 18 teams.
Crazy.
Pretty remarkable. You can submit questions every week to the show by using hashtag Big Talk, and we appreciate you for tuning in this week. Enjoy all the games. Big Talk with Todd and Noah, presented by Xfinity. Make sure to download and subscribe on the NBC Sports YouTube channel, wherever you get your audio podcasts. As said, enjoy the week. We'll be back next week, as always, to break it all down.